Good evening, everyone. I'm Jillian Frobe, and it's my honor to be on the Advisory Council and the Events Committee of the Multifaith Network for Climate Justice. Welcoming is so important at any gathering. And so at this moment, I want to offer a heartfelt welcome to each of you joining this monthly gathering. And we just heard this, but I was asked to remind everyone that we'll be recording this session. So this month, our focus is legislative action attuned to faith-based advocacy. And in some ways, this is a signature of MNCJ, the intersection of spirit and action. In addition to welcoming each of you and acknowledging this gathered community, I would also like to invite us into a space of gratitude and kinship with our human and other than human relatives. Let us recognize the personhood of all living beings on this earth. Some traditions have more embodied knowing of this true interconnectedness. So tonight, as we listen to information about legislative process, let us also ground ourselves in compassion and love, central to and necessary for transforming a culture of individualism with practices of consumption and extraction to those of right relationship with and care for Mother Earth and all our relations. It is in this spirit that I invite each of us to acknowledge and give thanks for the places and the land that we call home. May we be filled anew with deep gratefulness and a commitment to nurture our relationships with all our Coast Salish and Indigenous neighbors, their ancestors and traditions, with active awareness of their gifts of care and protection from time immemorial, offered to us, many who have roots as settlers on these sacred lands. May we also affirm our shared responsibilities, our renewed awareness as we try our best to walk humbly and gently in this endeavor. We will soon hear potent and poetic words written and spoken by our Washington State Poet Laureate, Rena Priest, at the opening of the 2023 Washington legislative session. With Rena's permission, I was drawn to transition to her reading with one stanza from her poem. So here it is. Yet we live on lands where equality bloomed once before, when Indigenous nations lived by beliefs and followed ancient laws that said an orca whale and a cedar tree are sovereign, sentient beings with inviolable rights, just like you and me. Those beliefs are not childlike or primitive. They are a blueprint for a just and fair society, which for Native nations is not a vision, but a memory. So now we'll turn to the recording of Rena reading her poem. And you may want to adjust your volume for the reading. We tried it out, it may be a little bit soft, so feel free to take care of that on your own computers. And at the end of Rena's poem, we'll have just a few moments of silence before we transition to the next part of our evening. So Steve, you can begin the recording, please.
These abundant and generous homelands. Warm at home in the long cold days of winter, How and why should it trouble our thoughts, that eternal question of the haves and have-nots? We are not thoughtless or hard of heart. We give what's fair, do our part, and the privileges we claim as our share, those we reserve without reservation, perhaps even unaware of our good fortune. Perhaps, never having troubled deaf heaven with our bootless cries, we walk well-heeled through our blessed lives with ease. Or maybe we stride with shrewd purpose in shoes made for long days of toil on our feet. You have yours and I have mine, and aren't most of us just trying to get by? But still, the hungry, they are always with us. And isn't the worry always that if we pause our labor too long to care too much, that we shall be counted among them? How can equality be anything but a utopian dream for those whose history and legends tell only of statesmen and kings, and whose concerns are less and less over the justness of wars as much as they are for the accumulation of more? Yet, we live on lands where equality bloomed once before, when indigenous nations lived by beliefs and followed ancient laws that said an orca whale and a cedar tree are sovereign, sentient beings with inviolable rights, just like you and me. Those beliefs are not childlike or primitive. They are the blueprint for a just and fair society, which for Native nations is not a vision, but a memory. That sublime belief in the wisdom and goodness of the giving earth is not so elusive, is not a birthright exclusive to tribes. Yes, it's mine, but it's yours too, if you want it. If you want it, you must tell new stories, true stories on which to build new beliefs, true beliefs in the interconnection and value of all living things. The supremacy of man is only a fiction. This is the secret every river knows, for water rises and falls and in a circle eternally flows, from the cloud to the mountain, through the valley to the sea. Thus is a circle, a balanced, perfect, and natural state of being. And who are we to interrupt it? We do so at our peril. When the forest burns, our eyes burn and our hearts fill with ashes, and when streams are dammed and wanting of salmon, doesn't our blood want of vitality? This is the folly of hierarchy, with man at the top. We reap the fruit of inequity, a harvest of terrible hunger. Now is the hour of our reckoning, a moment of dire lack.
Hello.
Though unrehearsed, we
I'm
must
fine. How are
summon the
you, honey?
courage and the will to act, to assure our children a better path forward. And when we look back, will we see that in fact we were not recovering from natural disasters, rather we were the great disaster from which nature must recover? With hindsight for eyes, we must sail toward a beautiful vision, an era that is trying but hopeful, demanding but healthy, whole, and equitable. We will be steadfast in our course, carried by the winds of change into a more balanced way of being. For while free will is at the whim of our human nature, nature loves balance, and so our nature is humane. These truths being self-evident, if all are created equal and life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness are our legacy, then we must each wish that for the other and repair this world we've borrowed from our children. We must recall a time when we did not have the things we think we need, but had the whole living earth for free. As long as the rivers run, as long as the tide flows, and as long as the sun shines, you will have land, fish and game for your frying pans, and timber for your lodges. These were the promises on which this state was founded. These sacred homelands in which the call of eagles resounded resplendent from the tops of towering cedars, where none went hungry when salmon were running in clear, cool waters. These abundant and generous homelands were given in exchange for a promise of a world we could live in, a world that would keep giving to all in common for as long as the rivers run. Hashka.
Good evening. I'm Kathy Delbeck, also a part of the events committee for MNCJ. I get to introduce Reverend A.C. Churchill, and we're very excited to have AC with us this evening. She is the executive director of Earth Ministry, and as you know, we have a relationship. MNCJ and Earth Ministry have a relationship together. They are AC, they are an ordained minister within the Christian Church, the Disciples of Christ, and come to the work of environmental justice as an expression of their deep commitment to participate in healing, justice, and transformation. They view the work of environmental justice to be intrinsically connected to anti-racism and pro-reconciliation work, and have over a decade's worth of experience working in and with faith communities as a faith-rooted organizer, coming to us most recently from Dallas, Texas. We're excited to have this Southern transplant in the Pacific Northwest, and they are looking forward to setting down roots and building community across the state. After AC brings us a legislative update, Dave Ketter, who is the coordinator for MNCJ's Policy and Legislation Committee, will offer comments that are locally based, and our evening will be completed with a reflection and summary by Reverend Frank Castro-Ware. So I will offer the Zoom room now to AC, and thank you for being with us.
Thanks, Kathy, and thanks to the MNCJ leadership team. It is good to be with you all this evening. I am joining you all from Tacoma, land of the Puyallup people, in my area where I'm at right now, and want to recognize also that Earth Ministry, Washington Interfaith Power and Light, is a statewide organization that works on the unceded territories of the Northwest Native nations, many of them. So I'm glad to be with you all this evening. I'm going to share my screen and we'll move through our time together because we have a lot to cover and probably not as much time as we need to, but we'll get in what we can and what we don't. We'll follow up for questions later, and you'll have my contact information, and not most importantly, but really importantly, you all have your own in-house advocate who does all this work. So I'm really excited to learn from Dave, to learn what's happening in Whatcom County and Bellingham and surrounding areas. So if not, we don't get it covered tonight, we still got time. Good thing we do this work together with each other. Okay, share my screen. So here we go. Let's see. Can you all see my screen? Is that okay? Okay. Wonderful. So is it okay?
At least on my end, AC, it's just showing loading with a black screen.
Okay, it's loading. Thank you for letting me know. There you go. And I have a co-collaborator here. You may hear my 4-year-old. Let me stop my share and try again. Thanks for letting me know that that wasn't coming through. So let's see if it can now. Here we go. See, this just proves even younger individuals and a geriatric millennial like myself can struggle with technology from time to time. Did it? No, it happened again. Okay, let's just do this. Let's, instead of, y'all are just gonna be able to see my slide deck because I don't want to waste our time. Here we go. Did that work? Hey, huzzah, look at that, it did. Okay, so for those of you who are unfamiliar, Earth Ministry Washington Interfaith Power and Light, we are a ecumenical, actually we started off as an ecumenical organization. We are have transitioned and are now a multi-faith environmental justice organization that works across Washington state to transform faith into action for the well-being of communities and the environment. You'll see our mission statement on the screen there. And we have been doing this work for over 30 years. This year, we celebrate our 30th anniversary and excited about the opportunities that will come as we do this good work together and opportunities to celebrate what has happened and what will be in the future. So a couple of our, well, y'all just get to see all my tabs. I'm just gonna go these. Open book. Anyway, go over a little bit for this evening of what we're actually going to be talking about with one another. So we're going to start off this conversation with what in the heck is faithful advocacy? How does it differ from advocacy in general? What faithful advocacy looks like in action? Then we're going to go over the 4 legislative priorities that Earth Ministry WAIPL has identified as are important for us and our priorities. This doesn't mean that we don't have more that we work on. We just recognize that we have to build collective power, and sometimes that means you have to choose which ones to amplify and support the others, but amplify specific ones. And then we're not going to have time to do practice like we like what would be what I would hope for if we had time together. So I'm going to send y'all home with some homework. Okay, we're going to practice. Okay, here we go. What is advocacy? So advocacy in general is speaking up to influence political, economic, and social institutions, right? It's about creating change within the systems of the particular government and within our, at least within the work we're talking about tonight is a legislative one. So speaking up to influence decisions and addressing root causes of issues through public policy. It is, in essence, democracy in action. Faithful advocacy, on the other hand, is still those same basic framework. And we add in the elements of speaking up for systemic justice. So not just addressing the wrongs that we see, but adding in changing the systems that have caused the injustices. So, and it's based on our own religious and spiritual values. Key part of this is co-creating a just and loving society. What we like to say is faith in action. And I do want to recognize that faith in action looks a lot of different ways. And so tonight we're speaking legislatively, but there are lots of different ways that faith and spirit and connection to the divine, the other, our connection to one another looks. tonight we just happen to be highlighting faithful advocacy. So it isn't a couple things. Faithful advocacy is not partisan. We don't endorse candidates and we don't encourage others to vote for a particular candidate. This doesn't mean that we don't get involved in advocacy work. So traditionally, it looks like nonpartisan voter engagement, taking a position on issues, bills, and ballot measures, educating others and asking them to act, and asking elected officials to vote a certain way. Or, like you'll hear a little bit later, which I'm going to hopefully touch on just briefly, which is requesting an agency to take a particular action. For us at Earth Ministry WAIPL, we talk often about what the attributes of faithful advocacy look like. And they're a little different because they bring in some elements around values and building bridges that often are not talked about as prevalently within other advocacy areas. So the first is that it is values-based. This is how we do our work across political, ideological, theological, spiritual, geographical boundaries and divisions, things that we have been told and often divide us. When we come together centered around values of wanting each other to have access to clean air, clean water, for all of our community to be able to have healthy spaces to be in, we come together in this values-based way that is heart-centered. So it often incorporates facts, uses facts to help speak about what the issues are, but also moves people from the head to the heart. That we move people to deep feelings about what it is impacting their communities and how we can be a part of changing the challenging systems that are in place. It also seeks justice and equity. So for us, this looks like following the lead of impacted and frontline communities. I mentioned earlier that we started off as an ecumenical organization, and we've been doing a lot of intentional work to become multi-faith. This is true for us also when we talk about moving from a predominantly white organization, and we're still white-led, to listening to and being in collaboration with coalition partners that are led by frontline first impacted communities of color, for working communities. It's important for us to make a shift from an environmental stewardship model that oftentimes focuses specifically on environmental issues that impact white communities, and that's not exclusively, but predominantly, to environmental justice, which is focusing more on or incorporates the issues that are impacting communities of color and poor working communities. So when possible, we advocate with those on the margin and not just for them. So we work in collaboration and partnership. I think this other piece here about it being hopeful is something that I want to speak to explicitly, because this is something that as people of various faith traditions, of spiritual traditions, these are one of the pieces that we bring to advocacy that is different than other communities. So we bring in, as people who are grounded in spiritual traditions and faith traditions, we bring in the tool and the resource of being able to speak about hope, to speak about a movement of the spirit in the world, a vision of what could be that's different than what is now. And the other tool that I think that we don't talk often enough about is this tool of lament. And so much in our advocacy work is focused around campaigns. You win or lose campaigns. And there's hardly ever time to grieve the amount of work that has gone into getting you to where you are, only to have a loss or to have something, not go the way you wished it would have gone. And so our world often says, move beyond, move quickly, get beyond that grief, move to the next campaign. We don't have time. And yet, as spiritual people, as faith people, as people who connect to faith traditions, we have these two tools at our access to be able to talk about a vision of a world that could be, and to say a public outcry of grief is also liberating work, is also justice. The work that we do also builds bridges. It goes back to that values-based thing. When we can come together around certain values, then we can bridge the divides to have dialogue and to have hard conversations, to bring people together around these shared values. And the last kind of attribute is that it is supported by our community. So when we speak to elected officials, we say, I'd say I am AC Churchill, and I am a member of First Christian Church Puyallup, or I'd say I am part of Earth Ministry, Washington Interfaith Power and Light. So we acknowledge that we are a part of a community, that we do not do this work on our own, that we are a part of others who are part of a community who are willing to participate in a vision of something that could be different than what is right now. The way we do this, and I see there's something in the chat. I want to make sure. Oh, wonderful. Thanks, Bruce, for putting that in the chat. The piece here is and we'll get to this a little bit later, is recognizing that faithful advocacy is storytelling. This is something that we as again, spiritual people have this tool of being able to tell stories, connecting ourselves to those who have come before us, connecting future generations to continue the spiritual stories that have grounded us and rooted us. So we are storytellers. And so when you think about advocacy work, to frame it in that mind of these three pieces, and I'm going to briefly go over them right now, and then we'll come back to them. But the recipe for this is three parts. 1, name who you are. 2, what do you value? And 3, what do you want? So that's a big part, right? Sometimes we talk a lot about who we are and what we value, but we don't ever explicitly say what we want. And when we're talking to elected officials, we got to name what we want, what the big picture is, and we got to name a specific ask where we want, what we want them to do as our elected official. So we'll come back to that. I'm going to move past slides. If you see my slide deck, we're going to move past slide 7, just because I want to move through these next ones kind of quickly. So for those of you who maybe, we're not going to assume we know where everybody is on our government knowledge, right? We're just going to start off in the same page, going over the same things. And part of this is to recognize kind of where we are within the government form that we have, right? So we got 3 branches: legislative, executive, judicial. And then each branch has a level: local, state, and federal. Primarily for Earth Ministry WAIPL, we operate within the legislative and the executive branches. sometimes judicial, but most often legislative and executive, the places where laws are passed and they're carried out. For Washington state legislature, when there's a particular bill, there is a whole series of steps that it has to go through in order to make it to potential for it even to get passed into law. First step in a bill reading is it starts off in a committee. Every bill is assigned a committee, and that's the policy committee. Oftentimes, this is where we have people interact with the bills that we are lifting up the most when we're asking people to sign in and testify. And then if it moves out of the policy committee, it goes to the fiscal, then down to the rules, then to a floor vote, and then we get to do it all over again. You repeat the whole process in the opposite chamber. And if it goes through all that and it is passed, it gets to the governor's desk, and there it could still be vetoed or signed. So it takes a lot of work to get a bill passed into law. And to add complication to this matter, at any particular point in this, it could not make it to the next level. So you see here the policy committee number 1. There are cutoff dates in the calendar for where a bill is. And we have just passed, or I'm going to highlight this, we've just passed the cutoff for the fiscal committee. It had to be into rules by Friday, to the 25th. The next cutoff comes March 8th. So if a bill has not left its chamber of origin by March 8th, or a bill has not left rules in the chamber it started in by March 8th, then it will die for that cycle. The thing to note about this is that oftentimes bills are introduced, they're introduced in both the House and the Senate, so to gain potential chances for them to keep moving through. They're hoping that one of them will gain some momentum, and that it will increase the chances of the bill eventually getting to the governor's desk. So right now we're in the rules committee. If the bills are not in rules, they didn't make it. And we had a bill, we'll get to it in just a little bit, a bill that we were hoping would make it through, that didn't. So that was hard to hear. But in the rules committee, the rules committee decides which bills actually get to go to the floor for a vote, and they have to be pulled in order to be taken to the floor for a vote. So they could just stay in the rules and nothing happened. Like, they don't actually get scheduled for a floor vote. And if they don't get scheduled for a floor vote by March 8th, then we lost a chance for that bill to be moved along this cycle. I'm going to pause there. I see, because I want to make sure that if we have a couple questions, that we have time for questions. And Kathy or Dave, if you could let me know, would it be better to go through all of them and come back for questions later, or would you like me to keep pause now?
I don't think there's a preference one way or the other. So
Okay.
It's up to you. But I'd like to mention, I'm pretty sure this is correct. Correct me if I'm wrong, Kathy, that this slideshow will be made available later.
Yes, it will.
And so will mine. So those of you who might be taking screenshots and or taking notes, it's up to you.
Yes. Completely
And
up to you. Okay.
and it's all being recorded, so that will be helpful too. So to add them together.
Wonderful. Yes. So yes, my slide deck will be available to you all as well. So if there is a question, let me know. You can pop it in chat if and I can pause. Otherwise we can keep going.
Mhm.
I think the thing I want to say before we get into the nitty gritty of the bills is this. If you're not expected to be an expert. You're not expected to be an expert on policies. You're not expected to be an expert on the science, on the nuances of the rules committee, or on any of the committees. If you are an expert on those particular pieces, that's amazing and that's wonderful. And you bring that expertise with you. And when we do this work together, when we come as faithful advocates, we're coming to share with our elected officials what is important to us as people who are living in our communities, who have a vision for what the community could be and how it could be different. So the pressure to know all and to have all of the information collected and curated, I would invite you to practice releasing that expectation, because the most important thing is showing up. And the most important thing is you communicating your story with an elected official. So we're going to get into some nitty gritty, but I wanted that point to come across. You're not expected to be an expert. Okay. So a couple things here, and again, like I said, you'll have access to my whole slide deck. So one of the things as we navigate, one of the things that we encourage people to do is to contact your legislator, and that can seem a little daunting if you're not quite sure how to get that information. So once you go, if you go to the Washington State Legislature website, which is leg.wa.gov, you will notice that there are a couple things on this main page. One, you'll see over here where this blue arrow is, the blue arrow pointing up is a tab of all of the potentials, places you could go. Let's see if I can, hey, there we go, a little bit better. Next is you'll see the legislative hotline. So if you don't like fumbling around or kind of trying to navigate a website, you can call the hotline and they can connect you directly to your elected official. This last piece where this other blue arrow is you could click on find your district and legislators. So thanks, Dave. So when you, so if you click on that, let's see. If you click on that, it will take you to this page where you input your address. And I inputted in the Earth Ministry office to see what our district would be. And so we're district number 36, and it gives you options to choose which leader you want to, elected you want to speak with. You just click on their name. I'll just show you their map. So here, I just wanted to point out a couple things about this particular website, or this portion of it is, it does, once you click on, so if I go back here, I clicked on Senator Frame, it would pull up Senator Frame. It would give me an option, the blue arrow, to email her. I also want to show you here, it shows you which committees each elected official is in. So then once you click your email, it will take you to a page where you can directly email that elected official and to share your information, share what it is, which bill you want to talk about, which initiative you want to talk about, and how you support or if you oppose that particular bill. So this, I'll make sure that when you send this around, this page about finding your district, or actually, excuse me, this page about finding your district and all of your elected officials, we'll make sure that gets sent around too. So back to this piece about being a faithful advocate. When you hear about legislation that you want to talk to an elected official about, I want to encourage you to think about framing your conversation with your elected in this format. So first, naming who you are. So what is a personal connection that you have? One piece of yourself that resonates with this specific issue, whether it be that you're a parent, grandparent, maybe you're someone who likes the outdoors, fisherman, a teacher, a hiker. Maybe you're someone who whose family member has asthma, or who's been impacted by, whatever it is that you find time, or you find that connection to the issue. The second piece is the communal identity, remembering that it's important to connect yourself to a community, because then you show the strength of the community, the people power that moves these systems along. You are connected with others who are like-minded, whether it be a faith community, MNCJ, Earth Ministry WAIPL, a congregation, whatever community that you would like to highlight in the midst, to let that elected official know that you are not alone in this work. The next piece is to choose some values that you have, whether it's you believe that everyone should have access to healthy living spaces, that everyone should have access to toxic-free healthcare products. But pick a couple values that you have as an individual and frame it with a story. So say, I am someone who has seen this happen in my community, or this is how this impacts me. This legislation impacts me because. So connect it to a lived experience. The next piece is naming, again, what do you want? You can name the big picture vision of the future that you're wanting to see, and then name the specific ask of how the leader that you are talking to can help get us there. So you say, yeah, well, let's go through the our priority bills, and then we'll do an example of what this faithful advocacy looks like as a form of storytelling. So the first two bills that I'm going to bring up. Oh, good to know. Yeah, thanks, Kendra. I'm going to read it maybe for those who didn't see. Important to know and tell others outside of MNCJ that the name of the committee that does most on climate is the Senate Environment, Energy, and Technology Committee, and the House Environment and Energy Committee. Thank you very much. Yeah. And we have some, yes, so both of those. Thank you. So the first two that we're going to be talking about are updates to the Growth Management Act. In 1990, the Growth Management Act focused on making requiring cities and counties to on the Growth Management Act focused on more on ecosystems than communities, and we are asking for both in this. The Growth Management Act requires cities and counties to develop comprehensive plans and policies that account for the needs of local areas and impact policies, zoning, and more. And it covered 13 elements and issues that a city and county must plan for, like housing and transportation and land use. So the first update to the Growth Management Act is House Bill 1181. There was a Senate version, Senate Bill 5203, which has been stalled, so that it's moving forward in the House, which requires counties and cities to address resilience and climate change in their land use policies. It requires the largest and fastest growing counties and cities to reduce greenhouse gas emissions and vehicle miles traveled through land use planning, and addresses and reduces the impacts of climate change through resiliency and natural hazard planning, like to mitigate and protect against the impacts of a changing climate, which includes planning for the protection from wildfires, droughts, landslides, flooding, sea level rise, and the heat island effect. It also includes provisions to reduce transportation emissions, because Washington's largest source of greenhouse gas emissions come from transportation, and to build more livable communities that do not rely exclusively on private car transportation. So we're asking for communities that have built within them that are more walkable, bikeable, and transit accessible neighborhoods. And for that, we're excited to say that that particular bill, again, has been referred to the House rules. So we are hoping that and putting effort and energy towards moving that out of rules before March 8th, so that it can move to the floor for House floor for a vote. The second piece, a bill that we were lifting up that we found out Friday did not make it past, and I said it has it here stalled in rules, but it's stalled in the Senate too. It's stalled in the House and stalled in the Senate, was an environmental justice update to the Growth Management Act that would have required that environmental justice and climate change were explicitly addressed to reduce health disparities, and it would incorporate the ideas of the HEAL Act, which were at a state level, but bring them into a city-county level. And we posted on our Facebook page this morning a prayer of grief that this particular bill did not pass, and that it seems like once again that work that centers and focuses on acknowledging and trying to move or acknowledges the health disparities within communities of color and poor working communities has been left, has not gained the momentum it needed to move towards rules and hopefully toward, eventually towards a vote. So we will continue working towards environmental justice and grief that particular bill, which was being amplified by a coalition that we listen to and follow, which is Front and Centered, which is a environmental justice coalition that is led by communities of color. And we often try to, we do a lot to follow their lead in amplifying which bills and policies need to be moved. So grief that one did not move along, and we know that the work still is there to continue. The need is still there. So are there any questions about the Growth Management Act in terms of the climate one, which the name also is planning for a climate friendly future? or the environmental justice.
AC, I don't have questions about either one of those. I just want to express gratitude for your talking about lament and grief.
Yeah. So important. We, those of us who do this work, those of us who live in communities with one another, we see the amount of energy and time that's put into trying to change what is, to make the world healthier and to heal, and to take time to recognize the loss when it comes. I think is something that is a form of resistance in a world that says get over it too quickly, So thank you for that.
That top one that says it's stalled in the Senate, does that mean it's dead for this session too, or is the fact that it's going through in the House?
Great question, Steve. So yeah, what you pointed out here is the interesting journey that the planning for a climate-friendly future will have to now undergo, right? So it will move from House rules, and with our energy and our movement towards it, it will hopefully move out of rules and then get to a House vote. And if it's passed the vote, then it turns right back around and repeats the whole same process in the Senate. So it starts off in the policy committee and then has to make it to the fiscal committee. It has a fiscal note attached to it. And so it'll have to go through the fiscal committee. It'll have to go through the Senate rules. And so I'll have to repeat that whole process. One thing to note about that is sometimes what we see is that a bill will begin to gain momentum in one chamber over another, and the members of the opposite chamber will pull back the pressure to get it passed when they know. So in this case, noting that it moved forward in the House, to pull back the pressure in the Senate so that the energy can go toward the House, so that when it comes back around. So just because it's stalled in one chamber doesn't necessarily mean that it ran into opposition or ran into challenges. Sometimes it means it just gained momentum in one chamber over the other, and that then they'll hopefully move it through. So great question. Yes, it will have to go, HB 1181 will have to go back to the Senate in order to become a bill through the process. Okay, we're gonna keep moving. So the next bill that we are lifting up as a priority is the Washington Recycling and Packaging Act. I'm not sure about any of you, but recycling can be confusing. Maybe I'm the only one. I know that's not true, but I think recycling in this state can be confusing. And to make matters a little bit more challenging, what we are finding is that that only about 50% of the items that are put into the recycling are actually getting recycled. The rest are going to landfills and incinerators. And so this particular bill would require consumer product producers to fund statewide residential recycling services for packaging and paper products. And it would create a graduated fees based on a product's ability to be reused, composted, or recycled. And the main point of this one is that it would shift the cost and the responsibilities to the manufacturers. Now, some of the questions that we've been hearing are, well, how would this ensure that the cost would not be borne then by consumers? And what we're seeing is that because it's been done in a number of other states, including Colorado and California, and those are the two that come to mind. But it's also been done across in different countries. So Canada has a similar system, and so do governments within Europe. So what we're seeing there is that multinational companies are already having to do some of these rules and regulations. And so adding Washington, it wouldn't be a huge add. They're already, at least from what we are hearing from our coalition partners, is that adding Washington to a system where the costs are shifted to manufacturers isn't as concerning as some might think it would be. The other element of this that is still, as far as I know, being included in would add in a bottle deposit system to Washington's recycling system. And this one has been referred to House rules, but stalled in the Senate. Any questions about WRAP Act?
I just had one question.
Sure.
The other thing about this that I think is really important is that there are some elements here about requiring that manufacturers take responsibility for recycling their own products. And for example, you know how when you try to get a label off of something so you can put it in the recycling bin? This would require them to make labels on there that you can actually take off. It's really, there are some elements of it that are really good. And I know that they tell us, and many people quote, that actually 50% of the stuff that goes in the recycling bin doesn't get recycled, but it's closer to 90% when you really follow it down the road. It's really important. And I'm so glad that you all are getting behind this one, because I mean, right now we have an estimated 1 ton of plastic and chemical waste on the planet for every person alive. And we really need to do something about this. Okay, sorry about that. I just had to get my 2 cents in. Sorry.
Thank you very much. Yeah, no, I think it's a good point to note. And there's a lot more. I'll make sure to send the flyer that we've got, a flyer that is on our website, but that is also has more information about this around that it's the producer's responsibility to fully fund and coordinate the system. However, it would be the Department of Ecology would provide oversight and review plans and annual reports to the manufacturers and producers. So our last one that we want to lift up for you all is Toxic Free Cosmetics Act, House Bill 1047, which bans hazardous chemicals, including PFAS, phthalates, formaldehyde, lead in cosmetics and personal care products by 2025. What this is that, and then it also fills in information on the hazards and provides incentives for small businesses to make safer products. So this is a bill that we are working with Toxic Free Future on. And we worked with Toxic Free Future and many others for Safer Products Washington a couple years ago. The reason why we're lifting up this particular bill is that when it comes to cosmetics and personal care products, what is being found is that personal care products and cosmetics that are used by women of color, and in particular Black women, have higher rates of toxins in them than other products. and that the more the cheaper the product, the more chemicals that are being included in them. And so this, while Safer Products Washington is a good system and reviews over the products to ensure that each particular product has a study and research done on it and gives ample opportunity to replace and make safer products. This particular bill is a quicker route to removing hazardous chemicals from cosmetics and personal care products. And for us, it's an environmental justice a priority to lift up that so many women of color, Black women, are impacted and don't have access to safe cosmetics and personal care products. Are there any questions about this one? Okay. I'm going to highlight something that is not on the legislature real quick, but I want to get it in because it's timely, which is that we have sent out a letter calling on faith leaders, and we are considering anyone who is working within their community, maybe within an organization. Lay leaders do not have to be ordained to sign on to a letter asking FERC, which is a Federal Energy Regulations Commission, to protect our communities. If you haven't heard, there's a potential for a fracked gas pipeline expansion. The pipeline has already been built, but the proposal is to put in compressor stations in Idaho, Washington, and Oregon that would pump more gas through 60-year-old pipes. And so we're waiting for FERC to make a decision whether or not to approve or deny the proposal. So wanted to lift it up to you all as leaders in MNCJ that if you haven't seen the letter, we'd invite you to sign on and share that that expanding gas and expanding pipelines without adequate infrastructure and within aging pipelines is a risk to our communities. So wanted to lift that up to you all. Okay, my last couple of minutes, because I am excited to hear what Dave will bring to you all, is, and I'm going to share this in just a second in the chat. So I want you, not now, but at another point in time, to take time to practice some of these things that we've talked about. Take time to reflect on your own story about who you are, who you're connected to, what are your personal, how are you invested in these issues? What are the things that you value and would like to see in the world? Maybe those values come from your family. Maybe they come from your spiritual tradition. Maybe they come from other community sources, or your lived experiences. What do you value? And what do you want? What's the big picture? And then what would be a specific ask that you are asking your elected officials to do in relation to a particular issue? Then I want you to think about, I started this by saying, or have it in the slide as saying Earth Ministry WAIPL bills. I would also invite you to include in MNCJ priorities. So pick one of the priorities that you will hear about, have heard, or will hear about tonight. I want you to reflect on that and then share with someone your story about who you are, what you value, and what you want, and how it influences your thoughts on these bills. And then I want you to listen to somebody else's story. Maybe this is something that you all as MNCJ can do later. You don't have to do it tonight. But take some time to practice, because sometimes when we think about talking with elected officials, if you haven't done it before, it can be a little uncomfortable. You're not sure how to start the conversations. Maybe public speaking doesn't feel like it's a comfortable thing for you. Maybe text is better, or writing out your story. So telling your own story doesn't always have to be verbal. I'm a verbal processor, you might have been able to tell, but it doesn't have to be verbal. So maybe you write out your own story and you share that story with someone. Or there are lots of ways we can share our story, but take time to practice so that when you are invited and given a chance to connect with your elected officials, or when you find that bill or that issue that you're wanting to speak on, that you trust the voice within yourself that says, I don't have to be an expert. I know what I need to say. I have the conviction to speak out because I envision a different world for myself, my community, my family, and I'm going to share a part of my story. So take some time to practice, whether that be tonight or another night. And here are some additional ways that you can get involved with us. I know most of you, or some of you may already receive our emails. You can check out our website. I think Dave forwards some of our legislative alerts on. If you would like to get on that list as well, I can make sure to put that in the chat and send to you all. My contact information, if you would like to talk to me a little bit more or talk to members of my team, members of the Earth Ministry WAIPL staff, you can email me at ac@earthministry.org. And I really just a deep thank you to you all for inviting myself to come and be part of this work. And a deep thank you to you all for all of the work that you all are doing in Bellingham and Whatcom County. I am glad and delighted that we are in partnership with one another. And to highlight this image over on the side, if you can't read what it says, you only get what you are organized to take. So when we come together, that may seem a little strongly worded, but when we come together, when we bring our people power together, our spiritual stories together, we can do the work of transforming our world and putting our faith into action for the environment. So I will say thank you, gratitude to you all. And Dave, I am excited to learn from you. So what shall we learn tonight?
All right, thank you so much, AC. I hope that you are able to learn as much from me tonight as I did from you. It was quite enlightening. You went to some nuances and depth that I didn't expect and definitely benefited from. So let me get my slide deck up, and you'll be patient with me for just a second. Okay, and then we'll try the magical. Let's try this. See if it works. Are you seeing the slides? Oh, AC's got the hands up. Thank you. Thank you. Awesome. But before I start going into details that, about legislative priorities for the MNCJ and all of that, I want to let you know that, this MNCJ and the work that you're about to see is the result of a small group of people on our policy and legislative committee. And though small, we've been working hard, and it's taken some time for us to learn as we go. None of us are absolutely at all legislative experts, but we're doing it and we're making a difference, and we're hoping we're supporting you in making that difference. And Bob Penny, Kevin Clark were two key people in helping us get started last fall. They've moved on though. Dobby Weasley, and more recently, Joanne Ellison, Kendra Wagner, and Bruce Camblin. I know at least two of you are here, so thank you for joining us. They've all been super helpful in defining or identifying legislative priorities and coming up with ways to support you in taking action. So as this slide shows, tonight I'll go over the criteria for the selection of the MNCJ priorities, overview of some of the pieces of the priorities, though they do overlap with EM's, Earth Ministries. So thank you, AC, for taking half of those for me. Status of each of those bills, what's next that you can do to support them, resources to support your actions, how you can help, and your questions, all in 10 minutes. So let's get started. So here we have the criteria that we used for selecting our priorities, just to be a bit transparent about this. So we chose this mix of criteria of legislation that supports the MNCJ in achieving its vision and mission, legislation that supported other organizations' priorities like Earth Ministries and Resources and Sierra Club. You know, the more people we have behind these, that we at least get some of these bills across the finish line. Legislation that supports achieving the city of Bellingham's carbon emissions reduction goals. There were, whoops, I accidentally clicked, there we go. Anyone, and legislation that anyone in the MNCJ is knowledgeable about and passionate about and is willing to track and send out action reports. And we do have at least one of those. Karen Delanius is tracking a net metering bill and helping us send out action alerts on that as well. And we wanted not too many and not too few. So we started out with 5 and we'll go from there. So these are the ones that we started with. You received an email through the MNCJ list 2-3 weeks ago at least that named these, but as AC pointed out, some of these are, well, at least one of them, 5651 is no longer. It is stalled, unfortunately, but we had the GMA Act, the environmental justice in the GMA, preventing utility disconnections. This is one that's not on Earth Ministries' top priority list, but they are definitely supporting it. And then these two down below, which are not on the priority list of other organizations that I found anyway, or we found, but that we thought would support the city of Bellingham's efforts to reduce carbon emissions. Net metering, which if you're not familiar with that, if you install solar on the top of your house and you produce more electricity than you use, that extra electricity can go back into the grid and PSC is required to buy that excess energy for you. That program is, they have one in place, but now they're going to update it and extend it beyond its current scheduled date. Also was fair access to community solar. And that's where if you aren't situated in a place or you can't afford to put solar on your house, but you want to have solar produced electricity, somebody can put a whole bunch of solar collectors on top of buildings or out in fields, and then you can sort of buy in or subscribe to getting electricity from that. This bill would have supported those efforts, but unfortunately, this is one that has stalled in committee as well, which leads me to the updates. This one's a little messy, so hang in there. You know, up there, this is all stuff that AC has already gone through, so thank you for that. I can skip down to the bottom. Oh, I should say though here with the second bullet point, as bills stall or die in committee, we will do our best to bring forward and start supporting another bill, because there are a long list of climate change bills that this legislature is considering right now. So this is one that would allow the Department of Natural Resources to, for their trust lands where they are currently, well, this is up for interpretation, but when the practice is to log so that local jurisdictions get revenue from that, hospitals, emergency services, schools and all that. But another way that they could do it, if there was legislation for it, is for companies to purchase carbon credits. That piece of forest would be protected then, and it could sequester carbon, and the state would still get money, or the local jurisdiction would still get the money that they might have gotten from timber harvest. However, you note here it says possibly. I just learned recently, though, that there's some problems with that bill in its current form, because things change as it goes through the process, and it may not be as strong as it needs to be. So I need to do a little bit more research on that before I can definitively say that we'll support that. And then down below, we have the net metering bill that is in the Rules Committee and doing just fine. We just got to get that out for a floor vote by next Friday or next Wednesday, I think it is. And since 1509, the Fair Access to Community Solar has died in committee. We will be bringing forward this one, 1391 Energy Upgrade Navigator Program. I love the names that they make for these things. This would be, as some of you know, probably all of you know, the Inflation Reduction Act and a whole bunch of state programs are coming our way fast and furious right now, but they have not really worked out the details of that yet, and it's going to be complex. So this bill would create an online portal, they're calling it, an online website that would be a way to navigate all of that so that you could get the benefits from that. So we'll be supporting that. And how will we be supporting you in taking action? Well, you've probably already noticed, including today, that we are forwarding, as AC mentioned, action alerts from Earth Ministry, especially about these two bills that are moving forward. So keep an eye for that. One just went out today with a whole bunch of, there are some interesting things happening on my screen. I hope it doesn't affect you. Are you still seeing everything okay? Because my screen has a bunch of squiggles on it. Strange, sorry about that. Other than that, these three bills that are down below that don't seem to be getting action alerts from other groups, we'll be creating those action alerts and sending them out as needed over time. So, and moving ahead even more, current actions. This is where you get to practice AC's awesome instructions on how to influence your legislators. So there are 2 representatives in our congressional district, if you're in the 40th district, which is South Bellingham, Rammel and Lekanoff, who sit on the Rules Committee for the House. So if you could email them or call them and advocate for all of these bills that we've been talking about to be scheduled for a vote, that's the first big step. But if you're limited in time for that, but I'm sorry, I should say it differently. Everyone, though, can take action by contacting your representative, as in the ways that AC was talking about, to just say, you know, please, when these bills come up for a vote, please vote for them, and then tell your story and go through the steps that AC mentioned. So those are the current actions that you can take. And then once they get into the Senate, then we go back to our action alerts, where we'll be encouraging you to register your pro stance on these bills, and we get to repeat it all over again. And so we're about halfway through, but we're getting there. Some of the tools, now you've got this recording with the awesome PowerPoint and instructions from AC, but online at the mncj.org. If you scroll down a little bit, you will see this icon, Faithful Advocacy. And when you click on that, you get our 2-pager that has the bullet point version of how to take faithful action. Let's see, I think we only have a couple more, actually just one more. So if you're interested in joining us and helping out with all this policy and legislation stuff, right now we're pretty hyper focused on the legislative session, but we also track the city as best as we can and their efforts. I was hoping to report more on that tonight because they were supposed to have a report to the city council today, but it didn't happen. And from what I can tell, they have postponed that presentation for 3 months in a row. So I'm a little disappointed and slightly concerned as to why that keeps getting postponed. I don't have many updates for you, except that they are trying to convene 2 groups right now, working groups, people from Bellingham, professionals, and people from a diverse array of demographics to support them and give them feedback and do a little bit of research on electrifying buildings, existing buildings. Like, how are we going to do that? Massive job, needs input from the public. And the other one is on vehicle electrification or electric vehicles. How are we going to encourage people to move forward with that? And what kind of infrastructure is needed? I will be on that committee, and I know that Scott Wiley has applied for that. He's on the call tonight, so hopefully we'll be working on that together. But if anybody knows people from low income, marginalized groups, et cetera, who might serve well on those committees, please let me know by emailing me at that address. And I'll leave it at that. And I think we could probably open it up for general questions. I'm going to stop sharing and see how much time. We're getting short on time. So if anybody has any questions on what I just presented, feel free to unmute.
I have one. Can you hear me?
I can, Marilyn. Hi.
Hi. We were talking earlier about the plastic pollution, and I spent a year researching industrial hemp plastic, and it is totally biodegradable. And I've called plastic producers in Washington, and nobody is starting to make it. And in Australia and New Zealand, they have made it extensively. And they make bags out of it that do not break apart and kill fish and other wildlife in the ocean. And I was wondering if there is a group I can link up with that would be interested in trying to inform people about this, because most people just aren't at all interested in it. And yet the pollution of plastic is gigantic.
Mhm.
With the type of plastic that we use, petroleum-based plastic. They find it in wildlife bodies all the time.
Yeah, definitely an issue of concern. I appreciate your bringing it up. I personally don't have any connections with the plastic industry and plastic producers. I didn't even know we had them in Washington. But if anybody else has connections, maybe they could connect with you some way, but I'm sorry, I don't have any suggestions for you.
Or is there a team that's working on plastic?
Plastics?
What are the alternatives?
Boy, I'm not,
You don't know of any?
not that focused. I mean, this sounds like something maybe the Sierra Club might be. Judy?
Yeah, the League of Women Voters Climate Committee is heavily into this, and I would check that out.
League
There
of
we go.
Women Voters, okay.
Very good. Good, I
Thank
got
you.
one lead for you. Any other questions before we wrap up?
David, this is Claire.
Hi, Claire.
What kind of report would be helpful to you? Council.
From the Climate Action Committee? So yeah, thanks for asking. Just to be updated, and it's been quite a while. And am I right? I'd love you to correct me if I'm wrong, that there hasn't been a Climate Action Committee report in a few months. Is that correct?
Yeah, I haven't put anything together, so
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, didn't know you were the guy in control or in charge of that.
No, I don't want to overstate my responsibility here.
Okay. Yeah.
But I do have some.
Yeah. And, I'm just curious, like, geez, mostly I think the last presentation or one of the last presentations said that there would be a report early in the year in the Climate Action Committee that would not just be an update, but would go over sort of the strategies and the goals and the efforts for the coming year. And we in particular are interested in that because that gives us like, oh, that's what you want to do. Then we can, those are the things that we can find ways to support you. And that's what we'd like to do. So without that kind of list, we kind of don't know what to do to support you.
Okay.
So thanks for asking. I really appreciate that.
You can expect one next meeting.
Okay, that sounds great. Thank you.
Yes, I mean, I can't set the agenda, but I can suggest that you can expect one next meeting.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Okay.
Okay, I think with that then I'll invite or give the floor over to Frank Castor-Ware for closing comments.
Thank you, David. And you know, my heart is really full. And I when I saw the subject matter about legislation, I wasn't expecting that to be my experience. But AC, I want it's sometimes a topic it feels a little you know, like so much. And you know, there many years ago, someone had, I just want to share with you, mentioned about there was a notion of we really need to prefer to focus on the poor in our society. And there was a sense that we can focus for the poor and for the vulnerable, or even we can be with the poor and with the vulnerable, or even for those special occasions, we can think and be as them. And then I realized through the years that how do I separate myself from that community? And I thought we can be for the earth and for the environment, or we can be with it, or we can actually come up from the perspective of thinking as the earth and as the world, and let that consciousness and that voice of what the planet, the world wants to speak through us. And AC, right from the start, when you said about how are we the society of love, and you got me when you said we grieve it and we feel the grief of the earth and allow that grief, earth's grief, to wash through us. So we become the voice and the heart and the feelings and the grief and the weeping and the joy and the excitement of earth, of the environment, of the communities that we're here to speak for. And it's so I love that, AC. I was like, the way you started it off, and then you went into legislation. I wasn't thinking, oh, that's something out there. I really had that sense of this is something that's working through us. And so thank you. I was like, this is really wild. I'm super enjoying this. And legislation stuff, I'm not always there. So beautiful. And then you really wrapped up with the idea of storytelling, that and you just ended it with, and then that storytelling, you can't tell a story unless you're telling the story as ourselves. And then we're allowing this whole movement of what's going on and the grief and the joys and the earth to just move through us and as us and speaking through us, and actually the energy of the divine that's in all that to be part of it. So I thank you. I just bottle that presentation. I from my humble opinion, it was really quite moving. And then we can move into being effective from a place of moving. And David, I just want to say thank you to you too, because when you were showing the different things you're working on, you know, I was a bit caught in the grief of things. And then I wrote down, this is fun, curious, exciting, creative, intriguing, challenging. I mean, we're going like, we could do solars and we can do net metering. And we just really had all these possibilities. We really stand on this cusp of grief, but also going into our hearts is all this other wonderful stuff. Has been my experience that you brought up, is this is stuff we can get on that makes these beautiful communities that we can live in, that are harmonizing and resonating and in you know, just in tuned with what the earth is asking from us. And you know, I just thought, and then that opening prayer where it says, you know, we always talk about we need to respond to natural disasters, but what if we are the natural disaster the earth is responding to? Just to switch the concept and be in that mind space. And I think AC, you just led us through, like, how can we think as earth and be in the people responding to the crisis that from the perspective of earth that we are. And it's humbling, and it's, you know, it really brings me you know, brings us, I think for me, it really dropped out of my head and allowed me to sit in the heart for this whole presentation. So on that note, I'd ask everyone, maybe you mentioned being this is a heart-centered movement. We can all put our hands on our hearts for just a moment and take a breath in through our hearts, not through our lungs, not through any place else. Just let our air take a deep breath in through our hearts. And know that our hearts beat in tune with each other as a community. And our hearts beat in tune with the very rivers and the winds of this beautiful planet, our home, this earth. And with each breath in and with each breath out, indeed we say inspirited, the sense of being in the spirit and in this connection. And I hope, Asa, you feel that this very heart energy is going out to you, for you personally, for the work you're doing, for the organization that you're involved with and we're involved with, and we're all working together like those fingers working together that you showed in that picture. And that we all know we're breathing the same. We're with each in-breath that I take, you take the out-breath, and I take yours, and we take each other's, and we're all breathing into this heart for a sense of coherence and a common mission, a common calling, and in a place of being centered in this energy where our power deeply can reside in. Yes, in grief. Yes, in grief and transforming grief, and also in the joy, the creativity, the excitement, the expression, and all the possibilities of the near future for ourselves, for our children, for our grandchildren, and on, and for this beautiful planet Earth. Lacey, we are grateful for you. We bless you. Thank you, David, and thank you everyone for being here today. Lots of love, lots of blessings. And I don't know, Kathy, do we have a see you next time? Do we have a final announcement, or are we good?
We're always a work in progress.
It's beautiful.
Stay tuned.
All right. On that note.
Good night, everyone. Thank you.
Good night,
for
everyone.
being
Thank
with
you.
us. Yes.
Good
Thank
night,
you.
all. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you. Peace be with you.